Sean and Shannon back with you for another day, another 50 cents. Hope you've had a nice day or having a nice day or
that's 50 cents after taxes.
Oh, it's 50 cents before taxes. It's
really?
12 cents after taxes. In any event, Chris Pronger is going to join us today, who needs no introduction, of course. If you don't even have to be a hockey fan, just casually watch hockey. You know who Chris Pronger was.
Champion, Hall of Famer.
Yeah, big guy, tough. Probably one of the guys I called a goon more than once.
Yeah, and he wasn't a goon.
He wasn't different. Really. He was
no, but
he's 6'6" at a time when 6'6" in the National Hockey League was monstrously huge.
He was a great professor of the art of intimidation. How's that?
Well, he was that.
Yeah.
But he wrote an article, and we've covered this subject over the years, but I was intrigued when John mentioned it to me because we haven't talked about it in quite a while. And it occurred to me that clearly nothing or very little has been done to solve this problem. And maybe why don't you take a minute here and explain?
Okay. So Chris is actually new to Twitter, and he wrote a timeline on Twitter to talk about the issues of professional athletes, particularly hockey players, and the perception that they make lots of money, and then the issues that money causes for players who don't know how to spend it. They get too much too soon. They abuse the money. They don't understand that their playing careers are finite, but their money isn't. So it became a rather fascinating article or a group of tweets that Chris talked about how he had to learn how to save money and spend the money and manage his life and his family's life, to the point where once he became public about it, it's something that really does need to be discussed. Because I think that there's a real assumption that once you sign that first contract and you become a millionaire, you're set for life. And that's not necessarily the case. And you have to learn how to live with money. And that's what he was suggesting.
Well, it really is quite astounding how many athletes, no, and I'm not blaming them, but they don't prepare for their lives.
And there are no safety nets for them. And the people around them don't help them enough. And do the teams help them enough? Do the players' associations help them enough? What are the safety nets for an athlete when they get that much money that quickly?
There are lots of people around who want to help you when you've got it. But the minute your career is over and you really need the help, that's when everybody disappears.
Right. And
you need to prepare for that. Chris Pronger is an example of that kind of guy. Spent a great deal, made a lot of mistakes while he was playing economically, managed to figure it out, was fortunate enough to have a career that was long enough that allowed him to figure it out.
Yes.
And did what most hockey players want to do, and that is stay in the game because they don't really know what else to do. So he took a couple of jobs right out of hockey in the hockey business with the NHL and then with the Florida Panthers, and now is out of hockey. And who knows, we'll ask him maybe for how long. Is it forever or might he go back? Chris Pronger will join us when we come back after these messages. It's McCowan. It's Shannon back with you on the Bob McCowan podcast on Sirius XM 167 or your favorite podcast provider. Chris Pronger was selected second overall by the Hartford Whalers back in 1993. He was captain of the Blues, the Flyers, and the Ducks. Won the Stanley Cup in Anaheim in 2007. Hart Trophy winner, Olympic gold twice in 2002 and 10. Has been retired.
What else has he done?
Well, he's been retired for 11 years now. Essentially forced into retirement by concussions and an eye injury. Big, strong, tough. That was his rep. Now lives in Chesterfield, Missouri, which is a suburb of St. Louis, I am told, Chris, and runs an elite travel agency.
Ladue. I live in Ladue, which is a suburb of St. Louis, but My wife was born in Chesterfield, so your information is not
Oh,
inaccurate.
I'm sorry.
Tilted.
But you are in a suburb of St. Louis. And,
Correct.
with which
Correct.
I'm familiar since I have a daughter who lives in a suburb of St. Louis. Thanks a lot for your time. To run down your resume is not something I do on a regular basis, but it's an extraordinary resume and worthy of mention. But off the top, wanted to talk about an article that you penned about the economics of sports, specifically hockey players, because that's obviously what you're familiar with. And this is a subject that has come up over my 40 plus years of being in broadcasting on a regular basis, but there doesn't seem to be a solution.
Yeah.
Do you know of anybody that's working on this? Because there's anytime somebody like you mentions it, there's like a kerfuffle for a short period of time, and then everything goes silent again. Well, tell us what your experience has been.
Yeah, not to my knowledge, and all of the things in that first tweet, and I actually just put out another one. A lot of the things that happened in that, I did myself. I made some of the same mistakes.
Sure.
Not all of them, but some of them. I was fortunate enough to have out-earned some of the mistakes so that they didn't become a bigger problem. Most players don't have that ability, and when you start talking about averages and whatever the league average is from a monetary perspective, or the league average from a playing perspective, it's not very long. And while it sounds like it's a lot of money when you're retired at 26, 27 years old, and when you start extrapolating back taxes, escrow, agent fees, cost of living, and then you're around people that are spending money, and you're trying to keep up with the Joneses, trying to be cool, you're impressionable, you're still quasi immature, but living the life of Riley, and you're a quasi celebrity, and everybody around you is telling you that you're rich and you're the best, and you get all the back patters. It can be daunting for a lot of people to really kind of grasp the situation, that it's not going to last long. It's very short-lived as it relates to the bigger picture. And so you start looking back on how best to manage. And I can tell you, when I was 18 and I turned pro, my roommate was Brad McCrimmon. My partner was Brad McCrimmon, and he was 36. And he told me, basically, we would sit around at night at dinners and whatnot at the rink, and he'd talk about the game, talk about life, talk about being a pro, what it takes to be a good pro, how to be consistent. The hallmark of a good pro is consistency, but also the hallmark of a good pro is consistency off the ice. And everything that he told me, I still went out and made the mistakes. I still went out and did all the stupid stuff that young kids do. But I saw him, he was coaching for Detroit when I played my 1000th game. And he gave me the game sheet, and we talked for a little while, and he wrote me a nice note. And he's like, so what do you think? Everything that you're now teaching these young kids in Anaheim is everything that I told you. The game changes a little bit, but life in general and that bigger picture does not change. And everything that he told me came true and was spot on. And then, you try to pay it forward and pass it along to the kids that you're trying to teach. A lot of times I was considered a hard ass and not nice and whatnot, but I'm also trying to win and also trying to teach them that life's not fair and life's not easy. And you gotta take advantage of what you have in front of you at that particular moment.
I would assume that the biggest problem here is, but you'll tell me, is that most guys get to the National Hockey League, their education is limited, and they have no plan after hockey. They've lived, breathed, ate, slept the sport, and they don't know what, when the end comes, it's usually unexpected, and they're not prepared for what comes next. Is that the biggest problem? Or would you say the bigger problem is you get some money and you blow it and you don't think about simple things like taxes?
Yeah, well, I think it's a few things. One of them, I think, is, and I was talking to somebody yesterday about this, is I'm going to use football, basketball, and hockey, the three physical sports, in order to play effectively and at a high level, you need to think of yourself as invincible, that you're never going to get hurt. You got to be flying around the ice at, 25, 30 miles an hour. You got to play in traffic. You've got to do all these things. And as you said, you've done it your whole life, and you probably haven't really focused on what's next after this because you need to be so driven and focused on your career. Sure. But I think also from an education standpoint, on the financial side, understanding the basics of, how to open a checking account, how to, a lot of players come in the league and it's, their agent's going to do it for them or their money manager is going to do it for them, and they never learn.
Right.
And the next thing you know, they're done and they don't know how to write a check. They don't know how to pay a bill. They don't know how to do things that are basic life skills. And so I don't think it's I think it's a real life education as opposed to, a university degree or what have you. It's common sense and common life that you're not really put in those situations to understand for the most part. And we're using generalities and averages, but for the most part, my dad was an accountant. My mom was a teacher. I mean, I had a bank account, but I didn't really know how to do some of that stuff. They did it, right?
Yeah.
And then when I turned pro, I had to get a bank account. I had to get, all this stuff. And I didn't want, from the outset, I didn't want to rely on people. I didn't want to rely on somebody paying my bills and doing all this stuff. And is it time consuming, a little bit? Sure. But it's also teaching yourself how to do those things. And I think a lot of players are so focused and driven on their sport and preparation and then they want to decompress and they don't want to have to think about it. And a lot of this stuff goes by the wayside.
Chris, you talked about parents, agents. You're a member at 18 when you sign your first contract. You're a member of the Players Association all of a sudden. You're also a member of a National Hockey League club. I mean, shouldn't there be safety nets in place that allow you to avoid making these mistakes? Or is that an assumption that the guy in the regular world makes based on the fact that at 18 years old, you're now a millionaire?
Yeah, I think that is, I think people are maybe putting too much trust in those specific entities that you talked about, because there's also this word called liability. And if they put you with somebody and you lose money or you get taken advantage of, they're on the hook because they made the introduction. And so I remember being in some player meetings when finances were quasi talked about and people asked about, well, is there a vetting process? Can we get a list of bona fide investment managers that have gone through this vetting process that you trust, that, have your best interests at heart? And I, to be honest with you, I really don't know where it went. It went back into the office, and I don't remember hearing anything about it. I don't have an answer for that yet. It's something that I think needs to be done, and whether that's, players that already have financial managers in place that are trusted and they like, whether that's, creating a vetting process in each city where there's a team and you've got institutions, whether it's a big institution or a big money manager or what have you. I think a lot of times what happens is they meet somebody in the community, befriend them, whatever, I don't know, and all of a sudden they're buddy and I got your back and we're going to hit a home run for you. Meanwhile, the kid has already hit a home run. And it's a matter of hitting singles and doubles and just letting your money work. And, you're impressionable, as I said earlier, and then you're done at 27, 28, if we're going off the averages, and your life has barely even started from an adulthood standpoint. And you have a hard time realizing that you're not making $1-2 million. You're making nothing because you don't have a job or you haven't thought about a job. And oh, by the way, you made 2 million, but really it was 1 million, but really it's less than that. As you extrapolate cost of living and what you're spending and not really understanding the golden goose at the end of the egg or at the end of the tunnel.
So is it your belief that if you were able to get a 10-year career out of the National Hockey League, even if you were an average NHL player, that your life after hockey should be settled, should be fine? Because the challenge is the challenge, and you went through it with all your injuries and then your retirement. I mean, what do you do with your life?
Well, it that depends. There's a number of factors. I think that it depends, but to say it all depends on what you spend. How comfortable you want to live. Right. I know towards the end of my career, I had talks with my financial advisor, and he's like, "Okay, we got to start de-escalating what you're spending so that when you're done, we have a concrete figure, knowing what we got to make plus so that you can reinvest and keep earning and keep growing the pie." And people talk, there's this old age, it was 4% of your net worth is what you could spend. Well, that's not true. It's probably 2, especially now. It might even be less than that based on inflation and taxes and all the other stuff. So you got to really kind of understand how much you're going to make realistically. And then when you're spending, you got to realize, and my dad being an accountant, I knew this full well. If you're buying a $50,000 car, it's actually costing 100, because you got to make 100 to make 50. So he would always look at it in that regard. And I'd always look at him like, "No, it's 50. And he'd always say, "No, it's 100. And I'm like, "It's 50. He's like, "No, it's 100. So we'd have this argument all the time. But at any rate,
in your thread, you tell the story of a player that had $2 million at his disposal, and he spent all $2 million without knowing that he had to pay taxes. True story?
True. Yeah, he paid. I think he bought his mom $1.5 million house. Didn't realize he had to pay taxes on the house, and then he bought a Bentley and a Hummer and literally then they're like, "Hey, you owe tax," and he's like, "What? You serious?" Because when I got my first check, my $1 million bonus, I got a check for 800 grand, but I still owed taxes on it. But they took off the smallest amount of tax that they could, and then they, and I got the check right now. I just put it in the bank. I didn't know, and nobody's telling you that stuff. Like, nobody at the team is telling you, "Oh, we didn't take out 40% that you owe. We only took out 20." And if somebody's not tracking it right away, if you're not on top of it and not paying attention, and I would just start playing. So it just sat there for a while. And I was living with a nice family, and he helped me find a money manager in New York. And I gave him my money, and we started up a relationship, and we started doing all that stuff. And not everybody is living with a family their first year. They're living on their own, or they're living with younger teammates, and they're out hooting and hollering, having a good time and living the life. And so, I thank my lucky stars every day that I live with this family, and he's still a dear friend. I talked to him this morning. Yes, but it doesn't always happen that way.
We're with Chris Pronger. So today you get if you're, a younger player and you're coming into the National Hockey League right now, or NBA, NFL, whatever it is, generally speaking, your agent is related to and offers you the services of a money manager who is tied to, been approved by the agency. When you came out in 93, did your agent have a money manager? Because it sounds like you went independent at that point.
No, they did. They had a few people that they used for clients that were willing to pay for that service. I didn't need it or want it, so I didn't use it. Some do, but some don't, because they don't want the liability, and they don't want the problem. If something goes awry or you make a bad investment, the players are gonna be like, well, "What happened?"
Yeah.
And I think the biggest ideological problem that players, athletes have. They've already hit a home run, but they see, the media does not talk about, they talk about people in the bigger terms of what they've lost, but they don't talk about how they've lost it. You see Kevin Durant investing in, all these, tech companies, whatever, killing it. You see Steph Curry, you see LeBron James, you see the so-called winners, but there's been lots of losers too, but they don't talk about that. They only talk about the end game. Allen Iverson lost it all. So-and-so lost it all, but they don't talk about how it facilitated all the losses and what really transpired. Obviously there's the odd story, but there's a lot of investment mistakes or people preying on athletes and, that aren't financially savvy and maybe get talked into doing things. I mean, in the thread I talked about, I saw some deals that, whenever I hear, oh, I'm going to put sweat equity in, I'm like, I'm good. No, thank you.
Yeah.
Why am I paying for it? If you don't have the nerve to throw your own money in, then why am I going to invest with you? So.
Well, I had always had a philosophy. The more jewelry I saw on an athlete, the more I was inclined to believe that he was going to have some trouble at some point in his career. And I think there's probably some truth in that, but I can't justify it. Then one of the other things you didn't talk about, I don't think yet, is the escrow situation in the National Hockey League today. Because that's like that hidden tax that nobody thinks about, right?
And it's going to get worse.
Yeah, well, it already has gotten worse, and that's why they extended the CBA to kind of quell the situation, so to speak, and kind of even it out, because it was going crazy. Players were losing 20-30%. That's nobody's good. And what happens when you build that in, when you're negotiating a UFA contract, you're negotiating your contract, you're automatically building in 10%. Because on average, that's what you've lost in escrow over the last, I don't know, let's call it 10 years. But that's a lot of money to make up for other, for A, the team and the cap, and then B, you're automatically building that in no matter where you go. The team is going to get it back, but the players aren't. So you got to try to factor it in somewhere. And, let's say a guy's making 700. Well, right now, I think it's 15 or 20%, whatever escrow is. It's a big number. And if you're making 10 or 15 million, it's an even bigger number. You think you're going to have it, but you're not.
Yeah.
So, Chris, you talked about Brad McCrimmon, who was a good old farm boy from Manitoba. Did a lot of things right in his time as a player and as a leader. When in your career, when did it finally hit you that maybe what Beast was telling you was right?
Well, again, like I said, I made a lot of mistakes. I think a lot of it, I got a DUI, went to jail. I, made a couple poor investment decisions. You make all this, stupid mistakes that you make, and you got to wake up and go, okay, how good do I want to be? Do I want to be the best player, or do I just want to be here for a good time? Do I want to win hockey games and win championships, or do I just want to be in the league and have a good time? And you got to make a decision how good you want to be, how good can you be, and how good you want to be. And then you got to put the work in, and you got to put the time in. And it was probably my fourth year pro. My third year was my first year here in St. Louis. It was a little touch and go. And then came back, trained all, had a good summer training, came back, had a really good year. And then that summer, I met with Charles Poliquin, who was Al McInnes's trainer. And I had a sore knee and I had a bad shoulder. I hurt my rotator cuff, and I met him at Al's house, and I walked in, and I probably walked 6 strides. And he looked at me just in how I was walking. He goes, "You got a sore left knee?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "You got a bad left shoulder?" I go, "Yeah." And and then he just talked to me about nutrition and diet and how that can affect inflammation, recovery. And we just basically brought it down to the simplest form. rehabbed for probably a month and a half on my knee and my shoulder. And then I started a new training program. And then that was like the base. And then I just kept building on top of that, on top of that. And then probably by the third or fourth year of training with him, I came in a training camp, and it was the year. Yeah, by the fourth year, that was the year I won the MVP.
Right.
That year I came in a camp, I could pick guys up off the ice. I wasn't massive, but I was just strong. And I literally picked up a few guys and just hucked them in training camp. And I was like, ooh, all right, it's starting to pay off. Hey, and I set up, all right, as crazy as it is, set up a drinking program. He's like, hey, you can only drink once a week. You can't go out and have a couple beers with your buddies and hang on the patio and do this or that. He's like, if you're going to do this nutrition program, you're going to do, you got to follow it. So I just became very tight on my diet, tight on, what I did, off the ice and extracurricular, and built a gym at my house and just pushed my chips all in.
But that's the hockey player. How did that change your financial philosophy, if it did at all, or was that just all a part of the focus?
Well, initially the focus was hockey, and that's what it goes back to. Like I'm talking now in year 6 or 7. Yeah, if you're going by the average, the guy's already done, and I haven't even thought. I've thought about the financial stuff, but I haven't focused on it. I'm focused on my career and okay, where do I need to get to get to where I want to get, where I want to be, from a player's perspective, and that'll get you to where you want to be financially, and on and on and on. So the thought is always let your play speak for itself and the money will be there. And unfortunately, you have to be more aggressive than that. But I also, at the same time, one summer I was interested in learning about insurance because somebody pitched me on life insurance and whatever, and how it can be a diversification tool. And I was like, well, I was in St. Louis. I'm like, well, I'll work there one summer. So I worked at Northwestern Mutual office one summer and, learned about insurance.
Chris Pronger is with us. We'll take a break. We'll come back. We'll chat some more after these messages. McCowan, Shannon, and we're with Chris Pronger, who needs no introduction to anybody who follows sport at all. Chris is in suburban St. Louis now. He runs an elite travel agency, along with your wife. Yes,
correct.
He probably works for his wife. Let's be honest. Okay.
Well, we all do.
Employee number one.
Yeah, you got that right.
Yeah.
Anybody who's familiar with your career doesn't need to be told that you were a physical, aggressive player.
A mean SOB. Come on now. Let's be truthful.
So as you watch the game today, I got a couple of questions. Number one is, are you okay with it? Do you like it? And number two, if you were 18 years old and going into the National Hockey League today, how would Chris Pronger play?
I'll answer the first part. I would say the one question I have is when there's a clean open ice hit, why is there a fight? When I first started, your teammates were telling you, get your head up. Now, if it's a dirty hit, yeah, that's a different story. But a nice, clean, open ice hit, there's always a fight. I don't understand it. But if there's a hit against the boards, there's nothing. Nobody fights. I don't understand it. It's number one, I think it's a lost art form and very few players do it. But I don't comprehend why that happens, because there's a lot of other stuff that happens out there that there's never a fight over.
Well, the game has changed. You have to admit.
Oh,
that,
100%. The game has changed 1,000%. 1,000%.
Now, what would you be?
In 2004, 2005, when the rule changes happened and you weren't allowed to hook and hold and do all the stuff that used to happen, I was told I was going to be a dinosaur and blah, 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 blah. And St. Louis traded me. And I would argue I was better under the new rules because I didn't have to deal with getting tired and leaning on guys and doing all that stuff. So I probably wouldn't be as defensive as I was. I look at the way the game's played now, it's pretty run and gun for the most part. I mean, for the most part, there's times when you got to tighten it up, but There's a lot, but you also got to realize, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to get points? You're trying to win. I probably could have got another 10 or 15 points a year if I just, no, I want to stay on the power play. I want to be on the power play. No, I'm going to run. We're up by a goal. I got a chance to make it a 4-on-3 or a 4-on-2. I'm going to go. Meanwhile, you got the top line behind you just waiting for you to miss the net so they can go down on a 2-on-1 or a 3-on-1. I just would not do that. My job was to win. It wasn't to get points. It wasn't to do all that. And you know, sometimes I think you see players, they're more interested in padding their stats, to be honest with you. You know, and it's nothing wrong with that, but don't do it on my team. When we're trying to win and be champions and all the rest of that, I'm going to call you out on it. I'm sorry.
What was your dressing room like? Did you guys you were on?
Look at the locker room I came into. We had Pat Verbeek in Hartford. We had Pat Verbeek, Brad McCrimmon, Mark Janssens, Jim McKenzie, Andrew Castles, Jeff Sanderson, Zarly Zalapsky was sat next to me. It was an interesting, eclectic group. But the leaders of the group, Pat and Beast, and Berkey and Nat, you know, were very vocal, very much driven to play on a winner and be winners. So I learned that. I already had that, but I learned that from them. And then I got to St. Louis, and you know, we had Jeff Courtnall, Holly, Al McInnes, Furzy, you know, ultimately got Gratz and Shane Corson. And, you know, it was a step up, A, in quality of player, but B, in expectations with Keenan there being his second year and the trade for me for Shanny and, you know, all that stuff. You learn real quick. And then, you know, as that kind of turned and I had a long-term contract and everybody else was becoming free agents, they named me captain. And, you know, I guess the first couple of years, whenever I hear somebody's a young captain, I'm like, well, yeah, they might be captain on the ice, but they're not captain in the locker room because they don't have the same experience as these veterans have. They don't have the same understanding of the league and, you know, professionalism and being a pro and all that, that a 21-year-old Connor McDavid, yeah, he can go on the ice and he's going to crank it up and he's going to be the leader. But he goes in the locker room, like, he doesn't know these guys. He doesn't have kids, doesn't have all the things that these players have. So from a life experience perspective, he's missing some of that.
Right.
So, you know, I think I was 23. I was a captain, and, you know, obviously you got a lot of high-end players on the team that, you know, they're the de facto leaders in the locker room. And yeah, you're going to be the guy on the ice and sometimes in the locker room, but you can't be the sole guy screaming all the time, you know, talking to players. It's not enough time in the day. It's a collection of leaders in the locker room. And, you know, everybody always looks at the captain or the assistant captain, and there needs to be more than 3 leaders. I can tell you that, because they all it's a herd mentality. You got to get everybody to follow along in the direction that you want to go. And if you got a couple outliers, you're going to run into problems at some point.
Well,
it was an eclectic group. It was an eclectic group in St. Louis when you think about a guy like Brett Hull and then a guy like Al McInnes. I mean, yeah, they offered certain aspects in that room that Al McInnes's drive was a lot different than Brett Hull's drive, even though they both wanted to win, correct?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the way they went about it and the way they prepared, you know, and that's it. Like, you can't chastise somebody because you don't see how they're preparing. I might not have been at Holly's house, or I might not have been out for dinner, might not have, and I might not have been out with Al, but you see the way that they're preparing for each game. It's different, but the end goal is the same.
Right.
And, you know, one guy's more of a fitness guy, another guy's more of a stretching guy. One guy's more of a, you know, sense guy, and one guy's more of a understanding the X's and O's. And so, you know, because somebody's not necessarily doing it your way doesn't mean that they're not preparing properly or want to win, or, you know, not everybody's super excited and energetic. Sometimes people are muted, like Scott Niedermayer, very, very understated, very muted. Just go about your business. Just go, go, go. And you got other guys who are just, going bananas, and you're going for the exact same thing, just in two different manners.
I'm intrigued by the places that you played. You mentioned Hartford and St. Louis, but you played with the Ducks and the Oilers and the Blues too. So you played in hockey markets, and you played in, I would think, in being in Anaheim.
Unconventional markets.
Well, Anaheim would be the one that would come up first.
Yeah.
Because I imagine you could hide really easily when you're there. But tell me about Hartford, because that's where you started. It was a market where, well, ultimately failed, but there was nothing else in Hartford. There was the hockey team, no competition.
Oh no, there was competition. UConn basketball.
I was going to say,
well,
UConn basketball, Yale and Harvard.
It used to drive me bananas.
I'll give it you.
We have a game. I'm in the NHL. I just get there. The first 3 pages of the sports section are UConn men's and women's basketball.
Wow.
Like, I thought I was in the NHL here. What's going on?
Well, it's not exactly the most renowned, attractive place to stay or live.
No.
Did you like it though?
Not really.
Not really. No.
No.
And that's a fair and honest answer.
No.
I've been there. And
honestly,
I think John has.
The first year went as good as it could because I lived with the family. They were great people, had great conversations. But had I lived on my own that first year, man, I don't know. It could have went sideways real fast.
Yeah.
What was your favorite place? I mean, I'm guessing it might be St. Louis because you went back there.
You know what? I enjoyed all of them for different reasons. Obviously St. Louis, great place to live, great place to raise a family. Had a lot of success here. Edmonton, I enjoyed my time playing in Canada. Had never done it. It was awesome to be in the city.
Easy to enjoy when you go to the Stanley Cup final, Chris.
Yeah, the way that team came together and just it was awesome to see the city rally around the team the way they did. Anaheim, the first year I was there when we won the cup, 364 and a half days of sunshine. one morning when I drove to the rink, it drizzled. And then obviously Philly. I mean, Mr. Snyder and the Broad Street Bullies. And, once I got there, I was kind of like, damn, it would have been nice to have played here earlier in my career. I was 34 when I got there. I'm like, yeah, man, if I was here in my late 20s, we could have had something. The tenure would have been much longer, and who knows what would happen.
That was probably, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that was probably the most rabid fan base, correct?
Oh, for sure. When I showed up for, I think it was the first, I might have been the first preseason game, and there's a guy standing on the glass with a Flyers logo tattooed into his head, and he's got a mohawk, and it's tattooed in color. I'm like, that guy's all in on the Flyers.
Well, no kidding. As I assume you still watch the game today, you still, participate in front of the television set at the very least.
I pay attention. My daughter's got a fantasy hockey team now, and so we're watching games and picking players and watching her guys, how they're doing.
So who do you think is the best as we get set for the playoffs in a couple of weeks? Who do you like?
I would say there's some teams that are bunched together that ultimately it's going to be whose goalie's the hottest. Mm-hmm. Whose goalie is because that's going to be the decision maker in a lot of it. Washington's probably got an X factor. New York's got an X factor. Florida's got an X factor. Who's going to start? Is it Bob? Is it is it Knight? Toronto, what are they gonna have? They learned from all these recent defeats. You can't run and gun in the playoffs, and I don't know if they're built for that. In the West,
well, you excluded Tampa, I assume by accident.
Well, they were champions, so I don't need to throw them in there.
Okay,
they'll be in the mix. They'll be in the mix, but they're back to back, so we'll leave them alone. They've got an all-world goalie, and they've got the firepower and they've got a pretty good back end.
Well, they've got a modern day Chris Pronger on the blue line in Victor Hedman. And I mean, Victor plays the game you played, right? Big and mean and rangy and can play at both ends of the ice.
Maybe not mean, but aggressive.
Oh, not mean like Pronger mean, because there is
Mean for
Pronger.
today's game.
No, that's probably fair.
Yeah, no, I mean, they've got all the pieces, and they somehow always make a trade near the deadline to give them that added depth. That they're able to find gems, and being where they are, they're able to pay, and it goes back to taxes and, cost of living and all that stuff.
Sure.
When you're living in Florida and you're not paying state tax, you're paying 37%, and that's it. They jack up property taxes and other stuff, but just playing in general, you're taking home more money. So,
since you retired, you worked for player safety in the NHL office. You worked for the Florida Panthers for a while. What did you learn in those 2 episodes of your life, and do you want to get back in?
Well, I saw, the inner workings of the league office and the business side of hockey and the NHL. You see kind of how the sausage is made, and I think when at player safety, when you make a change to how the game is played, there's always an equal and opposite reaction. What is it going to affect? Okay, hits to the head. Well, then we started to see more knee and shoulder injuries. Why did we see that? Because players were hitting not center mass, they were hitting on the side. And then players thought they could get out of the way, so they're trailing their back leg, and that was getting clipped a lot. I think you have to methodically, everybody wants an answer right now, and everybody wants a change right now when something comes up. And you have to methodically go through, if you make this decision and then reverse engineer, what is that going to affect? Right. How is that going to be an issue long-term, so that you're not just reacting to the media or reacting to players or fans or what have you, and just put some forethought into how we can either protect the players, fix the issue, make more money, whatever it is, and then slowly implement it, whether it's starting in the AHL or starting, what have you, and trying to bring it in. And unfortunately, what happens when you start making changes like that, it has to be negotiated between the NHL and the NHLPA. And we all know how long that takes. And so it's never a simple and easy solution. It might seem easy and simple to the layperson that just thinks of it and goes, okay. But when you have 2 bodies trying to negotiate an agreement and don't want to act or look like they're giving something for free,
right?
Then it's a bigger contest. And with the Florida Panthers, I think really more about when you look at the really good teams in the league, the top high-end teams, year in, year out, consistency on a number of levels. Coaching, management, coaching, players, so that there's a cohesive system in place from the minor league system. Once a player gets drafted, player development, minor league system, NHL, they all work together. They're all in it together. A lot of times you get, these people, they come into the league and they just want to move up. I just want to move up. I just want to be a GM or president. They don't want to put in the work, and they don't want to learn, how to find a player. They don't want to learn how to negotiate a player contract. They don't want to learn. And that's when mistakes happen. And, the other thing with Dale, it was about being patient. Let's let the player develop. Let's see the outcome. And, there's always the shiny thing over here, let's do that. Let's do that. But we've now seen the player as an 18-year-old, as a 19-year-old, as a 20-year-old. We've seen the player develop. Let's see what is the end game. And if you're getting an offer that's crazy, you're like, okay, we've got to take that. And oh, by the way, does it fit into the salary cap? You got to have a 5-year plan, like 3 to 5 year plan. What does the salary cap look like? you can keep kicking the can down the road, but at some point it's going to explode, and you're going to have to just start fire sailing people.
I mean, you came out of you finished your career, and essentially your first two jobs. Correct me if I'm wrong. Your first two jobs were in hockey.
Correct.
And now it's been a while.
Yeah.
Do you miss that? If the phone rang and somebody said, "Hey, Chris, would you like to be fill in the blank with the fill in the blank team?" Would you at least think about it?
Yeah, I learned a long time ago, never say never. I would think about it, but it would have to be something very special for me to want to get back in.
Okay, like what?
I don't know. I mean,
What would you aspire to do? Do you want to be a GM?
I don't know. I don't know. I think that, to be honest with you, I think that has played its course out, and I don't want to be 7 years old and be a GM. I want to live my life. I don't know how much time I got. I'm almost 48 years old. I don't know. I mean, we see players dropping like flies. We see, friends dropping like flies. I mean,
Oh God, yeah.
Life is short. You get to a certain age, and all of a sudden you start, I'm almost to the age now when I remember my parents, they'd have friends and, so-and-so's sick, or so-and-so just passed away, or so, and you're like, holy shit, it didn't seem like they were that old, but now I'm at that age. I'm seeing all these people dropping like flies. I'm like, all right, well, it's eye-opening at times, and, you can live 24/7 in the world of hockey and it becomes your life, or you can choose to have your own life and do your own thing.
Well, let me ask you this in terms of the game. Are you still competitive? Do you still love the feeling of winning?
That never goes away.
Yeah.
I don't let my kids ever win at anything. And when they start beating me, then I'll figure out a way to
cheat.
The mental side of the game. Rattle my change as they're making a putt.
Isn't that
well, this has been fascinating. It was it's nice to meet you. Chris and I had not met, interestingly enough, over the years, not that I can recall in any event, and I'm sorry we didn't, but we enjoyed this very much, and we thank you for your time, and maybe sometime down the road we'll give you another call, and hopefully you'll be as generous with your time as you have been today. We thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you.
Chris Pronger. We'll come back and wrap it up after these messages. Our thanks to Chris Pronger for joining us. That was interesting. He knows no short sentences, by the way.
That's okay. This is a podcast.
Perfectly good. I get paid exactly the same, and so do you, no matter how many words we have to speak.
Hold on now, just a minute. We get paid?
Oh no, I'm sorry. I get paid.
Yeah. Okay.
You are here out of the goodness of your heart.
That's right. Generosity and camaraderie.
There's not a single person out there that believes that. What did you watch last night? Baseball, basketball, hockey?
I watched a bit of baseball. I watched the Yankees beat the Jays, and then it was a 14-game night in the National Hockey League, including a couple of key games. Our buddy Boudreau kept his hopes alive, albeit slight, with a great game against Vegas.
Vegas was on a run, looking like they were going to get back into it, and every loss is critical for them now too.
Well, and I'll tell you what, I was also fascinated with watching the Buffalo Sabres, who I know it's late in the season. I know the games don't help them get to the playoffs.
Well,
man, are the Buffalo Sabres playing really, really entertaining, good hockey right now?
Well, that may be true because I don't pay any attention to the Buffalo Sabres. But one thing I know, when they line up against the Toronto Maple Leafs, give the Sabres the 2 points and take the night off, because that's what the Maple Leafs do.
Yeah.
It is curious. And people talk about, well, there's always a team that is your bugaboo, the team that you can't beat.
Yep.
But it's not supposed to be a team that's 40 points behind you in the standings. That's just lack of attention, and maybe lack of the coach's ability to motivate them. I'm not trying to throw Sheldon under the bus, but you gotta. Do you want to win? Do you want to get points? Are the Maple Leafs comfortable being where they are right now? Do they think Boston and Tampa can't catch them?
Well, it doesn't matter who the Maple Leafs play. It really doesn't.
Well, you think they're going to lose no matter who is their opposition?
I think there's a good chance of that. Yes.
Well, you answered the question. And I don't disagree with you, John. I mean, there's no evidence to support the theory that the Toronto Maple Leafs, in spite of this record-setting season, are any different than the last few years.
And Austin Matthews is going to have more than 60 goals, in my opinion. And will it go for naught if they get eliminated in the first round? And it's not going to be Austin's fault, because I think that he's had an unbelievable season, and no reason to think he can't do the same thing in the playoffs. But he can't do it alone. Marner's been great. The hockey season has been fascinating to watch, particularly in the East, when you know the 8 teams. We've known the 8 teams for 2 months almost. And now it's just jockeying for position. And what we do know is that there's going to be 4 good teams in the NHL, in the Stanley Cup playoffs, in the Eastern Conference, eliminated in the first round. That's what we know.
Regrettably, the Brooklyn Nets won last night, so they're in the playoffs in the East. And I say regrettably because now I have to listen to all the people continue to say the Brooklyn Nets are going to win the championship. And and I've been listening.
I'm not sure I'd want to play them in the first round of the playoffs.
Well, I'm with you, but I've been listening to it all year, in spite of the fact that they barely have managed to get to 500 with their record. I'm
a Kevin Durant
for
fan.
Another couple of weeks.
Durant is so good.
Well,
so
good. They have the skill, they have the talent. Do they have the mental fortitude to get over this hump? And we'll see, I guess. Now, we got to get out of here. Time is our enemy. For John Shannon, Bob McCown, we'll see you tomorrow.